There are two Hebrew words hiding inside the name Adam. One means dust. The other means something the church almost never talks about. And the gap between those two meanings, that gap is the entire story of what the Bible thinks a human being is. You've heard the name Adam your whole life. Heard it at Christmas pageants and in creation debates and in every sermon that starts with, in the beginning. You've heard that God formed a man from the dust of the ground, breathed into his nostrils, and the man became a living soul. That's the version most of us were given. Clean, concise, familiar. And it is not wrong. But it is dramatically, almost architecturally incomplete. Because in the Hebrew original, the author of Genesis was working with a precision that every English translation has had to navigate. And in navigating it, almost every translation has made the same trade-off. Flatten the language, keep the story moving. What got flattened is the name itself. You are reading a translation of a translation. And the thing that got lost is right there, in 3 Hebrew consonants, at the very beginning. Imagine working with a text so old that the people who copied it were already centuries removed from when it was first written. The Hebrew of Genesis is not casual, it is dense, the kind of writing where a single word choice echoes across 4 other words in the same sentence, where the grammar encodes theological arguments that no footnote can fully explain. Open it to chapter 2, and pay attention not to a single word but to a word family, because what you're looking at in the original is not a name, it's a system. The root at the center of everything here is aleph-dalet-mem. Mem. 3 Hebrew consonants. In biblical Hebrew, roots are the skeleton of meaning. You learn a 3-letter root, and you start to hear how the language builds related concepts from the same material. The way a city might build its bridges, and its houses, and its market stalls, all from the same local stone. From the root aleph-dalet-mem, the Hebrew of Genesis generates a cascade of connected words. And in Genesis 2, the chapter where the human being is actually formed, the text uses almost all of them in close proximity, layered against each other, each one pressing the meaning of the others deeper. The first word, Adam. Adam, Strong's H120. The noun meaning human, man, humankind, the species. The Brown Driver Briggs Hebrew Lexicon, one of the most respected scholarly dictionaries of biblical Hebrew in existence, lists Adam as appearing 560 times in the Old Testament as a noun, and it is explicit that the vast majority of those appearances are not the proper name of the man in the garden. They mean a human being, any human being, a person, the generic member of the species. When Psalm 8:4 asks, "What is man that you are mindful of him?" the Hebrew word is Adam. When Job describes man born of woman, the word is Adam. When the prophets address the sons of Adam, they mean the children of the species, all of them. The word is not primarily a name, it is a category. And the English reader who sees Adam capitalized and thinks personal name, first man, Garden of Eden, is already one step away from how the Hebrew reader would have heard it. The second word, built from the same root, Adamah, Strong's H127, ground, soil, the cultivated, fertile surface of the earth. Mifrak, the word the farmer knows, the word that appears when the text talks about the land that produces crops, or the ground that swallows blood. The New American Standard Bible translates Adamah as ground 64 times, and land or lands over 100 times across the Old Testament. And Strong's connects Adamah directly back to the same root as Adam, describing it as soil, from its general redness. The color is already in the definition. The ground is named for what color it is. And this is where something remarkable happens. Adamah is grammatically feminine in Hebrew. The ground is she. The creature formed from the ground, Adam, is grammatically masculine. The soil is the source. The creature is what the soil yields. Before a single theological argument has been stated out loud, the grammar has already made a claim. The human being is a product of the earth, related to the earth at the level of gender and origin, drawn from something larger and prior than itself. The third layer of this root family, the verb Adam, Strong's H119, meaning to be red, to become red, to be dyed the color of blood. This is the verbal root from which the nouns derive. It appears in Proverbs 23:31, "Do not look at wine when it is red," and in Nahum 2:3, "The shields of his warriors are red." Red is the verb, and the ground is called Adamah, and the human is called Adam, because both are described by this coloring. The clay soil of the ancient Near East, especially in the Jordan Valley and parts of the Levant, is iron-rich, visibly reddish, the kind of earth that stains your sandals and your hands. The ancient Israelite reader would have known this color from childhood, would have recognized the naming immediately. This ground, this reddish, fertile soil, is where the creature's name comes from. And then there is a fourth word hovering in the same family, present in the linguistic neighborhood of Adam, acknowledged by multiple Hebrew scholars with appropriate scholarly caution. Dam, blood. The same 3 consonants as the root, without the leading aleph. Blood is dam. And from the discussions at the Be Hebrew Academic Forum, where professional Hebraists engage these questions, to the work of the Ancient Hebrew Research Center, scholars have noted that man, ground, and blood are gathered around the same color in this root family. Red, the color of clay soil, the color of what runs through living veins, the color that the verbal root calls everything in this word group. Whether Dam is the direct etymological ancestor of Adam, whether the word for human being is in some strict causal sense derived from the word for blood, is debated in academic Hebrew linguistics and should not be stated as settled. The major lexicons, BDB, Hello, Strong's, trace Adam to the root meaning redness and describe the connection to blood as a color association rather than a direct derivation. But what they do not debate is that the author of Genesis placed these words in deliberate proximity. Adam, Adamah, the redness, and one consonant away from all of it, blood. In a tradition where naming is an act of revelation, and where the choice of words carries theological weight, that proximity is unlikely to be accidental. Picture the landscape of the ancient Near East in late summer. The soil in the Jordan Valley is not brown, it is red. Iron heavy, clay heavy, the color of a wound that has started to dry. That is the Adamah. Now look at a hand against that ground. The same temperature, the same redness underneath, slightly darker, slightly warmer. The creature and the earth sharing a color that the language has already baked into both their names. When the text said, God formed Adam from the Adamah, the original reader didn't hear a metaphor. They heard an observation. Now open Genesis 2:7 and stay with it. The Hebrew reads, Vayitzer Yahoveh Elohim et ha'adam afar min ha'adamah, vayipach be'apav nishmat chayim, Vayehi ha'adam lenefesh chaya. The Lord God formed the man from the dust of the ground, and breathed into his nostrils the breath of life, and the man became a living being. Every word in that sentence is load-bearing. Begin with the verb, yatsar, formed. Genesis does not use bara here, the word for creating ex nihilo, from nothing. Genesis does not use asa, the general purpose word for making. It uses yatsar, the potter's verb. The verb Isaiah reaches for in Isaiah 64:8. We are the clay, and you are our potter. We are all the work of your hand. To yatsar is to press, to shape deliberately, to form material with hands that know what they are doing. This is not God speaking from a distance. This is God working close, the way a craftsman works, with attention and intention, and the particular investment of a maker who cares about the object being made. The material is afar, dust, but again, the specificity matters. Afar min ha'adamah, the dust of the Adamah, the fine particles of the fertile ground, not the rock, not the sand. The scholar Chaim ben Torah has noted a distinction most commentaries overlook. The animals in Genesis 1:24 are formed from haaretz, the land generically, the broad term for the earth. Only the human being is formed from afar ha'adamah, the fine particular dust of the cultivated reddish fertile soil. The human creature is made from the most worked over, most broken down, most intimate portion of the earth available. This is not degradation, this is intimacy. God did not reach for the nearest rock. God gathered the fine particles of the most specific ground and pressed them into a particular shape. Then the breath, nishmat chayim, the breath of lives. Chayim is plural in Hebrew. And the word for breath here is nishama, not ruach. This distinction matters. Ruach is the wind of God, the Spirit, the powerful movement that sweeps across the face of the waters in Genesis 1:2. Nishama appears in contexts of closeness and intimacy. The breath a sleeping person breathes, the breath of near presence. Job 33:4 says, The Spirit of God has made me, and the breath, nishama, of the Almighty gives me life. God does not blast the creature into existence from a distance. God bends close. God breathes into nostrils. And the creature becomes nefesh chaya, a living being, a living soul, an animated self. And here Hebrew makes a claim that most English translations obscure. Nefesh does not mean a spiritual component installed inside a body. In the Hebrew worldview, the nefesh is the whole animated creature. The dust with breath in it is the nefesh. Genesis 2:7 is not describing the creation of a body and then the addition of a soul. It is describing the creation of a single unified thing. Dust plus breath equals a living being. You do not have a nefesh as a separate possession. You are one. The being who is earthy and breathing is the soul. The creature who came from the Adamah, animated by nishama, is the nefesh chaya. This is the moment where I want to slow down and just sit with the Hebrew logic. God makes a creature. The creature is made of earth, literally, of the reddish soil whose name the creature will share. And the creature does not become alive by receiving a separate spiritual component. It becomes alive by breathing. thing. The breath is the life. The dust plus the breath is the soul. The creature is not imprisoned in its material. The creature is its material, awakened. Now the text opens into a distinction most sermons never surface: the difference between Adam and Ha-Adam across the two creation chapters of Genesis. In Genesis 1:26, God speaks, "Let us make Adam in our image, according to our likeness." Here, Adam appears without the definite article, no the, just Adam, a generic noun, functioning the way humanity functions in English, or humankind, collective, the species, not yet an individual. And then verse 27, "So God created Ha-Adam in his image. In the image of God he created him. Male and female he created them." The article appears, Ha-Adam, and then the pronoun shifts to plural, them. Male and female together are the image, not the male alone, not an individual. The imaging of God in Genesis 1 is the project of the species, carried jointly. Now Genesis 2 consistently uses the definite form, Ha-Adam, this specific creature, formed from the dust of this specific ground. The scholar Michael Heiser, writing from within the evangelical tradition, notes the grammatical distinction clearly. Adam with the article tends to indicate the specific individual. Adam without the article tends to function as a collective or generic noun. Genesis 1 is the proclamation about the species. Genesis 2 is the case study of what the proclamation looked like when it first occurred. Your English Bible, in almost every major translation, collapses this distinction, man in both cases, sometimes Adam with a capital. The grammatical signal that shifts the meaning from category to individual, the definite article, ha, is invisible in translation. And what disappears along with it is the full argument Genesis is making, that to be human is first a declaration made at the level of the species, you are made in the image of God, and second, a specific physical earthen event, you are pressed from the red clay soil by a God who works like a potter, close and intentional. Consider Genesis 5:1-2, where the text uses Adam 4 times in rapid succession. Twice it refers to the man, the individual. Twice it refers to mankind, the species. The New International Version has to make a call every time. Sometimes it writes Adam, and sometimes it writes mankind. The Hebrew makes no such distinction on the surface, same letters, context carrying the weight. The English translator's problem is built into the word itself from the beginning. Now for the honest turn, and this channel means it when it says honest. There is a version of this word study that circulates widely, in YouTube videos, in popular devotional books, in churches, that goes further than the evidence supports. The version that says Adam unambiguously means blood man, that says the root clearly and directly derives from dam, blood, that presents this as settled scholarly consensus. It is not. The Brown Driver Briggs, Halot, and Strongs all trace Adam to the root meaning redness, and describe the possible connection to blood as an associative relationship through shared color, not as proven direct derivation. The B Hebrew Forum, where professional academic Hebraists work through exactly these questions, is explicit that the etymological connection between Adam and dam is phonological proximity and plausible literary wordplay, not established etymology. This matters not to diminish the passage, but to protect it. The confirmed picture, the Adam/Adamah connection, the shared root, the shared color, the wordplay that every lexicon acknowledges, is already one of the richest pieces of word theology in the Hebrew Bible. You do not need to overclaim to find the miracle here. In fact, overclaiming corrupts it. The moment you present an uncertain etymology as a certainty, you've handed the skeptic the tool they need to dismiss the whole thing. And more importantly, you've replaced what the text actually says with something more convenient. The channel's credibility, and more importantly your credibility when you share this, depends on keeping that line clean. The confirmed claim. Adam and Adamah are built from the same 3-letter root. The ground and the creature share their deepest linguistic identity. The color of both is red, built into their names by the verbal root from which they derive. And the author of Genesis placed these words in deliberate, artistic, theologically loaded proximity. That is not a modest claim. That is an extraordinary one. It is sufficient. Now let us watch Genesis 3 close the circle, because it does. And the way it closes it changes what dust to dust sounds like. Genesis 3:17-19. God speaks to the Adam after the fruit, after the hiding, after the whole unraveling. And in verse 19, God says, "For you are dust, afar, and to dust, afar, you shall return." The same word that appeared in Genesis 2:7, where the afar was the raw material God used to press a living creature into existence. Fine dust, the most broken down particles of the fertile ground. It appears again here, and now it functions as a closing bracket. The sentence that opened in Genesis 2:7, God formed Ha-Adam from a farm in Ha-Adamah, closes here in Genesis 3:19 with the same word. You came from afar. You return to afar. Notice carefully what the text does not say. It does not say, because you sinned, you will now die. It says, you are dust, and to dust you shall return. The mortality is not introduced in Genesis 3 as a brand new punishment. It is acknowledged. The creature was always afar, always the fine, temporary dust of the soil. The breath was always borrowed. The animation was always a gift, not a default state. What Genesis 3 reveals is not that death was invented at the fall, but that the creature now experiences death in full consciousness, without the tree of life, without the garden, without the proximity to the one who breathed close enough to fill its nostrils. The ground itself also changes in Genesis 3:17. God speaks to the Adamah, "Cursed is the ground, ha-Adamah, because of you." The creature and the earth from which it came are bound together not only in origin, but in consequence. When the Adam falls, the Adamah falls with it. They share a root, they share a fate. And in the prophetic literature, when the land is said to mourn, as in Hosea 4:3, where the land mourns and all who dwell in it waste away because of the sin of the inhabitants, it is the Adamah grieving with the Adam it produced. This is not incidental poetry. It is the text developing a theology of human ecology before the word ecology existed. You are made from the ground. What you do lands on the ground. Your sin and your faithfulness are not private transactions between your soul and the sky. They are events in which the Adamah is implicated, because the Adamah is your family. You share a name. You share a root. You share a color. I keep thinking about the moment in Genesis 4 when Abel's blood cries out from the Adamah. God says to Cain, "What have you done? The voice of your brother's blood, dam, cries to me from the ground, ha-Adamah." Blood crying from the earth, dam from the Adamah. The root again, the color again, and now a crime. The earth that produced both men has received one of their blood, and the text makes the connection explicit through the words it chooses. The Adamah opened her mouth to receive your brother's blood. That moment, Genesis 4:10-11, may be the clearest instance in the entire text of the root family working at full force together. God says, "Now you are cursed from the ground, meha Adamah, which has opened its mouth to receive your brother's blood, dam, from your hand." The ground received the blood. The Adamah took in the dam, and Cain, the Adam who spilled it, is now cursed from the very material whose name he shares. The network of the root family, Adam, Adamah, dam, redness, humanity, soil, blood, is not confined to Genesis 2. It runs through the text like a thread, and Genesis 4 pulls it taut. This is what the original language makes visible that the translation cannot carry. In English, "the ground has opened its mouth to receive your brother's blood from your hand," is vivid imagery. In Hebrew, it is a sentence where the ground, Adamah, receives the blood, dam, from the hand of the human, Adam. Three members of the same root family, in the same verse, doing terrible things to each other. The language itself is staging the tragedy. Now let us follow this word family where it travels in the New Testament, because it travels into the hands of Paul, and Paul knows Hebrew. In 1 Corinthians 15:45, Paul writes, "So it is written, the first man Adam became a living being." He is quoting Genesis 2:7 almost directly. Then he continues, "The last Adam became a life-giving spirit." Two Adams, one who received life, one who gives it. And then in verses 47-48, "The first man was of the earth, earthy. The second man is from heaven. As was the earthy man, so are those who are of the earth. And as is the heavenly man, so also are those who are of heaven." Paul's argument about resurrection, the central argument of 1 Corinthians 15, which is in turn one of the most important chapters in the New Testament, runs entirely on the Adam-Adamah connection. The first Adam is earthy because Adam's name is the name of the earth. The name was always a statement about the material. The creature came from below, from the reddish soil, from the afar min ha-Adamah. And Paul sets this earthy Adam in contrast not to destroy him, but to describe the trajectory that resurrection offers. The earthy thing can become heavenly. The Adam of the Adamah can be transformed into something the Adamah alone could never produce. Notice that Paul does not say the earthy thing will be escaped. He does not say the soul will depart the body and leave the earthen material behind. He says, "We shall bear the image of the heavenly man." The same word image that Genesis 1 used when it called the species the image of God. The resolution runs through transformation, not escape. The Adam who came from the Adamah will not abandon the Adamah's legacy. The Adamah will be upgraded, the dust made incorruptible. You cannot feel the full weight of 1 Corinthians 15 without the Hebrew behind it. Paul is not writing abstract theology. He is doing a word study. He is taking the name of the species, reading its etymology, and running it forward into what he believes about Jesus and about the people Jesus transforms. Paul sits in a room with a letter to write and a city full of Greeks who do not know the Hebrew scriptures the way he does. He reaches back back to Genesis 2:7. He writes, the first man, Adam, and he knows that in the original, Adam and Adamah are almost the same word. He writes, of the earth, earthy, and he's saying, the name already told you this. The creature's name was always an honest description of the material, and now he's offering something that changes the destination without denying the origin. There is a revolution in all of this for how you understand your body, your mortality, and the physical world you inhabit every day. If you've spent your Christian life with a vague embarrassment about being physical, about being tired, about aging, about the animal weight of a body that needs food and sleep and rest, about returning to the earth when you die, Genesis 2 is the text pushing back against that embarrassment. You were made from Adamah. The potter chose the clay deliberately. The earth is not an accident in the design of what you are. It is the design. God yetzar you. God pressed. God shaped. And God breathed close enough to fill the nostrils of a creature made from soil. The Adamah is not your punishment. It is your material. And in the Hebrew reading of Genesis, there is no shame built into that. There is only the astonishment that dust can breathe, that clay can think, that the red earth of the ancient Near East can contain a nefesh chaya, a living soul, an animated being, something that looks back at the stars and asks what they are. Ashes to ashes, dust to dust. You've heard those words at gravesides. They land like weight. And now you know that they are a translation of a Hebrew word, afar, that was also the material of the first human being. You return to afar because you came from afar. You return to Adamah because your name is Adam. The circle the text draws is not a circle of defeat. In Hebrew theology, it is a circle of integrity. The material was honest from the beginning. The creature was always temporal, always borrowed, always earthen, and the breath was always the gift, not the default, not the minimum, but the extraordinary thing that changed what a handful of dust could be. So here's the question I want to leave with you, and I mean it as a genuine question, not a rhetorical one. If the name of your species, in the language in which these texts were first written, is built from the same root as the ground you walk on, if Adam and Adamah share 3 consonants, a color, and an origin, does that change the way you understand what you are? Does it change the way you hold mortality, not as an alien invasion of what should have been permanent, but as the honest arc of a creature who was always made from borrowed material? Does it change what you think Paul is promising when he describes the resurrection? Not escape from the earthy origin, but transformation of it. The Adam of the Adamah becoming something the Adamah alone could never produce. Leave your thoughts in the comments. This channel exists because this kind of question deserves real conversation, not passive watching. And if this is the kind of depth you've been searching for, the kind where the original language is the starting point, not the ornament, subscribe. Every video on this channel is built on the same commitment. The translation is where you begin. The study begins where the translation ends. Next time, we go inside a Hebrew word that your Bible almost certainly translates as soul, and the original word carries something so different from what that English word means that it will change the conversation you have been having about death, heaven, and what you actually are. The word is nefesh, and it does not mean what you think it means. The dust was already holy. It just needed the breath to know it.